Welcome to Issued for Construction. I'm your host, Jonathan Jacobs. Today I've got with me a gentleman who walks the line between architecture and interior design because he's not an architect and he's not an interior designer. What he is special. How's that for an intro for you, Jake?
That's a pretty good intro. I thought you were going to hit with the discipline, but that works. Special's good.
I have with me today Jake Olivera from Jake Olivera Studio. And it's not actually Oliveira. It is.
It would be Oliveira if you were pronouncing it with the Portuguese accent.
Okay.
Oliveira is great.
So just so you know, if you've ever said his name incorrectly, now you're put on notice. Jake is a product designer. He industrial designer. He is an incredible talent, and you'll find out about all of that today. And I would also be remiss if I didn't tell you. You can head over to the liner notes. You can take a look in the liner notes. You'll have a link to Jake's website. You'll be able to see what he actually does, because talking about it is one thing, seeing it is another. That is an important element. And there'll also be some links to, you'll see through Instagram. So you can head over there. And now it's enough of my voice. So let's go to you, Jake, and let's talk about you as a child and your interests and where you grew up, where were you born? Later in today's episode, you're going to hear Jake and I talk about the profound impact of his upbringing, the unforgettable aromas of his mother's traditional cooking, the vibrant community gatherings, and the laughter that filled his childhood home. Those moments, those scents, and those shared meals don't just pass us by, they become a permanent part of who we are. Creating those deeply rooted memories begins at the heart of the home, which is exactly why I am so proud to partner with Kaplan's Appliances, because they provide the products and the foundation that help bring those family gatherings to life. But Kaplan's is so much more than what goes into a kitchen. They are a cornerstone for our professional community. They understand that some of the best business meetings and industry breakthroughs happen when you're just sitting around having a great hot cup of coffee. That's why Kaplan's regularly hosts amazing gatherings and professional events right at their space. Whether it's in the quiet of the morning or a bustling afternoon, these events give us a chance to talk through local opportunities, share our current experiences, and grow our collective knowledge base. Let's face it, being a professional in the design and construction industry can sometimes feel isolating, but at a Kaplan's event, you're reminded that you are part of a community. Kaplan's puts an immense amount of intrinsic value into the relationships they build. They care, and they are true partners to the trades, you, architects, designers, builders, and you as a homeowner. If you want to learn more about what the Kaplan's experience is really all about, head over to the liner notes and you'll see a link to their website. Or if you prefer a personal touch, email me directly at jonathan@issuedforconstruction.ca, and I would be more than happy to personally set you up with an introduction just for you. Yes, you. All right, let's get back to Jake.
So yeah, as a child, we're going way, way back. I was born in Cambridge, Ontario.
Okay.
So I'm from Ontario.
Yeah.
At the time, I guess you would kind of like consider Cambridge by boroughs. So there was kind of Galt, Hespeler, and Preston. Galt's the really pretty one.
Okay.
No offense to Hespeler or Preston, that everyone kind of like envisions as a little European town. I was raised sort of right on the border of that area of Galt and Ayr, Ontario, which is a very small town. So yeah, my mother was born there in a multi-generational household. My dad immigrated when he was a kid. Okay. And
from where?
He was from Portugal. Both of my parents, both sides of the family were from the islands, from the Azores.
Oliveira.
Yeah, exactly. So my dad immigrated, and they were both raised in Cambridge. They met at a festa, which is like a very classic Portuguese way to
at a what?
A festa, like basically a festival outside the church. And so there would be a big cookout, and the kids at the age where they want to start dating I've learned this, would walk laps around the church and kind of like have a conversation with the person that they were interested in.
Almost like speed dating around the church.
Hilarious. Yeah. So I guess, kind of like that. And then obviously, they, there was high school and there was the whole young love, and yeah, they have a wicked relationship that's very influential to me in terms of how I hope my relationship to be. But yeah, raised in Cambridge.
Hold on, I don't want to. Sorry, I don't want to jump past.
Yeah,
that.
sure.
The reason I don't want to jump past that
Sure.
mainly is because the way you just described your parents was very similar to the way that like mine were growing up. Like my parents were like, they were the epitome of what you'd consider a love story.
Yeah.
They went on 6 dates and they got engaged.
Amazing.
So, like, I can appreciate when you talk about growing up and seeing that kind of love.
Yeah.
The value that put into you about what a relationship is supposed to be.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it was sort of foundational for me. I also feel like unconventionally as a kid, not only would you see like, my wife has her own stories about when she first met my parents and how obvious their kind of like, their love still seems like high school love.
Yeah.
Within the household, the way that was like expressed as well, which is pretty unconventional for like Roman Catholic Portuguese people, was we were a very sort of lively debate family.
Oh.
So, like there wasn't this setup with my parents where like parents are the authority figure, obviously at a certain age that was necessary to keep us from running into the street. But, there wasn't a setup where if we disagreed on something or we had a view on literally anything, that we couldn't kind of present that view and more or less spar over it. And then
verbally spar.
Verbally spar. Yeah. Never physically spar, but like verbally spar, to the point where when my wife first came over, we got into quite a debate. I think it was right around the time that like pot was getting legalized. And I remember after that conversation, she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like that was crazy. I'm so sorry if that was rough for you." And I was like, "Oh, that's just like a normal family conversation." The next day we're sitting having coffee. And so I think for me, like that was integral to how I see relationships, is like the candid nature of speaking your mind, and that, like disagreement or contrast is not like a negative thing. In a lot of cases, it just like helps you move closer towards where the synergy is. And so all of that, I learned from my parents, and that's kind of how I hope to carry myself. And it's like crucial to even how I do art and my work.
What do you remember of like the aromas of like when you were at the, what was it?
Festas? Yeah. I mean,
what are some of the core dishes that are made?
Well, it's funny. Yeah. So, I mean, bacalhau would be like it's the salt cod.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite meals that my mom makes. There's Dungeness crab. It's a lot of seafood basically, which I love. So yeah, but it's interesting. Like, because it was sort of a suburban way of growing up, I always my brother and I were sort of latchkey kids, for lack of a better term, where it was like, again, at a certain age, just be home before the lights turn on. So there was a lot of like independence and trust that we got when we were younger, which is like unconventional for a lot of kids.
Yep.
So that was really cool. But then culturally, when I was around family, it felt very Portuguese. And so, that kind of like contrast is very interesting to me, because I think like Portuguese culture it's a heart on your sleeve kind of culture, for better or for worse, in a lot of cases, typically for better. So yeah, having that and then being, kind of like a rambunctious kid running around was sort of how I found myself, I guess.
Okay. And what were your interests when you were this young kid?
Sure.
Experiencing all of these things between the freedom and it's funny, because you could say that there was the freedom, as you say, latchkey kid, but at the same time there's like a rigid line in the sand that you have to adhere to these guidelines and principles.
Yeah.
Otherwise that freedom can be taken away, I'm assuming.
100%. Yeah. And like to like go into that even more, my mom actually had this philosophy when we were kids, to your point, where her and my dad believed that like, when you're growing up, and I think as an adult as well, it's relevant, you need to do something for, she would literally say, the mind, the body, and the soul every day. And so, the body was something physical. So I was a competitive speed skater when it was very uncool. I wore the skin suits, all of that. Skated in the Yukon.
In the Yukon?
Yeah, on behalf of Team Ontario. I got a couple medals.
Cool.
So that was the body. The mind was obviously, you're going to be good at school. You're going to figure out how to be good at it. You might not be good at everything, but you're going to learn. And then the soul was like a creative aspect. So, I kind of would fluctuate between interests, but it was, it would be music, it would be drawing. It was always like creativity was the biggest portion of that for me. And though it was important to kind of like pour into each of those facets of your life, that was the one very obviously that kept calling to me. So
what musically, what did you do?
Oh man, everything. I love to play the drums, much to my mother's chagrin. I'd put the big over-ear headphones on that you would probably put on your kid, and they had nothing. And I was just banging away to punk music as loud as I could, breaking sticks and cymbals. Played the guitar. Was just really into was really into kind of every kind of music. I got a MIDI keyboard. I used to get Guitar Hero magazine, which you're probably familiar with. There was like a pretty slick era where, there was the print publication, but then they started to put CDs and floppies of the magazine in cereal boxes. So that was that was a thing. I would grab that and go down, onto the computer. We had dial up and just kind of pour into that. It was always kind of music and drawing for me. And I think as most kids, the way that I started drawing was comic book characters. I would try to draw comic book characters and just try to replicate the strokes and make my own little cards and put them in card sleeves of different characters and try to build the skill.
In the box to your right, for those listening, I'm sorry that you're not getting to look at what it is, but you can't really see it anyways. But inside of that box, I have a comic book collection.
Cool.
And X-Men cards.
Nice.
I'm dating myself here.
Yeah. I'm with you.
And I have some comics in there that are very, very special.
Cool.
So I grew up doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have lots of images of drawing sports figures.
Yeah.
And tons of different comics.
Yeah.
And you have your mind would just go. You put them into these scenes.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I feel like that was kind of where it started for me. And then, as I got older, obviously, when I was in high school, for example, I didn't really understand that there was a such thing as an arts career. I remember I was interested in, drawing and art and graphic design. I wanted to go to an art school. And wisely, I think my parents were like, we're not going to send you to Eastwood. You're going to go to Monsignor Doyle, and you're going to, have a more well-rounded education, I guess. Mm-hmm. So naturally I went to school, and it was sort of I still just really wanted to be doing art. And when I got to that age where you had guidance counselors and that kind of thing, I would try to express that. And, what seemed like the thing to be doing at the time was to get into computers. And that was not really that it missed an artistic element that I really liked. What I found that I liked about technology as a kid was taking it apart. So foundational to me was my brother was a gamer. He loved playing video games. I liked watching, but what I really loved was when his controllers would stop working, disassembling them and cleaning the bearings and getting into the weeds of that kind of stuff. So
you used to do that? How old were you?
I was pretty young. I remember the toughest thing I ever fixed was a BlackBerry Pearl. My dad had a BlackBerry Pearl, and the trackball got bad. You could pop the faceplate off of it. It was a little electroplated faceplate with two prongs. When you pop that off, they were basically these interlocked rotors like Jenga. So they were a stick with two wheels on either end, and they lapped over each other, and they were up in a stack so that the ball could roll in all directions. And so, that would be
he had pressed it down so that the tracks,
that gotten dirty over time. I don't know what it was. But it just kind of stopped working. And if you had a BlackBerry Pearl, Brick Breaker was the core element of a BlackBerry Pearl, right? Or Snake.
I was going to say Brick Breaker, Snake. Didn't they also have, or was it later that they had poker?
They had poker. I'm pretty sure they had
World
poker.
Series of poker was in there.
So trackpad is foundational. Yeah. And so I would just take these pieces of tech when it was they're not working, and I just pull them apart, which would be catastrophic typically, but it was hands-on learning.
And it didn't affect anything to do with the motherboard. It didn't affect anything to do with
no.
functionality.
Yeah, it was it was superficial. Yeah, that element, but had its function.
Yeah.
And so you could fix that. Part of that was probably, as I said earlier, my mother was in a multi-generational household. So my grandparents had her and their kids in the house, and then they lived with her aunt and her aunt's husband. My grandfather, when he immigrated, learned the language, and then he became an electronics repairman at Sears, and was He's like the smartest guy I know. He used to make me these sheets for multiplication. I'll try to find one and send you a photo. He would get them laminated. He had this like grid structure to how he'd lay out all the multiplication tables. He'd have a highlighter coating for them. They're like works of art. And so there was this element of thinking in the household. And on the other hand, my aunt's husband was a woodworker. And so he would make like the pews for the churches in the community and like other woodworking millwork projects. And so all of those dangerous tools were just in this household. And me and my brother would just go explore and play with them.
Crazy. And what's the age difference between you and your brother?
2 years. 2 years, which is, I don't know what the age difference between your kids is, but I feel like we were speaking about burnout earlier. Yeah. I think 2 to 3 years is like that sweet spot where you can probably ride out burnout. So it's like a nice age difference, I think, especially now. Yeah.
For those listening and wondering what the reference was to burnout, it was just simply when you get to a stage of where you are in your career and how you're going as hard as you possibly can towards burnout, but knowing that like that could come.
Yeah.
And then also the added implication of if you're growing and having kids.
Yeah.
And what the additional burnout looks like around now supporting both business and family.
Absolutely.
And your time and how it's no longer yours.
Yeah. Which I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast have mastered that.
Yeah.
So
either that or they're past it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Or you know what, if you're a student out there, you can know that that's something you have to look forward to.
True. Yeah. It's very true. Yeah. Sharpen your teeth that way.
So you and your brother were playing with all of this stuff at your aunt and uncle's place.
Yeah.
As you listen to Jake talk, one thing becomes incredibly clear. He is a designer who deeply respects the physical nature of things. He cares about how materials fit together, what causes tension, how a product feels in your hands, and how it reacts to its environment over time. Understanding the tangible quality of the materials you work with is arguably the most important part of the design process. That philosophy is drastically important when it comes to the elements that define and protect our spaces, like our front doors and windows. And that's why partnering with The Doors, a local European window and door supplier, is so important to me. Martin and Marta, the dedicated owners of the company, share that exact same relentless focus on material quality. They manage everything entirely in-house, ensuring that the product means just as much to them as a finished piece means to a designer like Jake. Their primary focus is high-performance aluminum windows, available in both double and triple pane, but their lineup doesn't stop there. They also offer stunning low-profile aluminum wood and steel options, among many others, available in virtually any color you can imagine. If you are looking to push the architectural boundaries of your next project, they are the team to execute it. We're talking curved glass, expansive curtain walls, seamless corner sections, and even structural glass corners where the wall meets the roof. They can handle massive custom spans up to 20 feet high or 20 feet wide. And to ensure the installation goes flawlessly, they even utilize their own specialized spider crane, which drastically reduces on-site stress and complications, well, because they own it. When you want to work with a product and a team that refuses to compromise on quality, you need to know Martin and Marta. You can find a link to The Doors in the liner notes, or if you'd like me to make a direct, warm introduction for you, you can send me an email. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, at issuedforconstruction.ca, and I'll happily connect you. Because they aren't just here locally to Toronto, they're working all across North America, the Bahamas, and the Caribbean. With that said, let's get back to the conversation with Jake.
And how do you think, or do you think that this was more organic, that had made an impact on you? Did you know at the time that this was something that you wanted to do? Or was it something that...
No, like I said, I definitely like at that young age, like before, high school and certainly before like university, I didn't know that was a career, so it was just the thing that I was drawn to doing. Like I think about everything in like a physical way, and like how things fit together and why they work and what's causing tension. And so I think there was just like interest and then a surplus of things to be confused by and try to learn yourself around me at that age. And then, as I mentioned, when I went to school, graphic design seemed like the only thing in the creative world that I knew of, and that a lot of teachers in that particular school knew was maybe a thing that I could do. So I considered that as like a career path.
Right.
So, started figuring out how to Photoshop, started making like all of the album covers for the local bands, doing all of that kind of stuff. And thinking like, yeah, maybe I could do this for a career. When I pitched that to my parents, they were like, well, why don't we look into like going into computers and engineering and coding, and like is there a more nuts and bolts?
They brought up coding?
100%. Like I said, they're very liberal and they're very smart people. And so I was fortunate that they sent me to like this enrichment camp at Waterloo University, which was for like the future of coders who probably run all the AI companies now. And I hated it. I was there. It was like a stay away for 3 days and I hated it. All that I cared about was playing with like the circuitry. I did not want to learn how to code. It was not of interest to me. So that was really good. And like I said, liberal, great parents that I'm very fortunate to have. I told them that and they were like, okay, well then that's not something you're going to do. So then let's consider, you think graphic design is a thing? Time to learn about it. And so there was this thing in Ontario at the time called Specialist High Skills Major, which was like a classification kind of, I think within the trades, if I have that correctly, for disciplines like graphic design and other disciplines that you could do at like local colleges.
Yeah.
And so I basically learned about that program and like applied to an awards program within that, where you would present your graphic design work and try to like win an award. And I won one, which was really cool, and was given it at Conestoga. So I think that was,
what was it?
It was my project was terrible. It was just about, I can probably find this too. I'm sure it's like on my parents' old computer somewhere, but it was, the brief was like, to create a poster piece that had all these specific parameters for print and scale and bleed and everything, about education. And I made the most predictable poster, I would say, at a high proficiency, of like Albert Einstein's head opening up with books and all of these like elements of the, education system pouring out of it, and some nice typography. Like I think the type was decent. It was good for my age. And I won with it. And so that was like the closest thing I got to a validating portfolio piece, because then when I, was ending high school and was looking at where can I go to further my studies, and I was looking at university, the thing I noticed was most of the design programs, a major portion of getting into them was like a portfolio review. And, in learning about the portfolio review, I realized that a lot of these people were very classically trained and had beautiful oil paintings and all of these things that I did not have. And so I kind of had my graphic design work. And then I was very fortunate to have, a teacher that was really into communications technology. So he ran like the wood shop, he ran the auto shop, and he was interested in rapid prototyping, which is a familiar term. But at the time, 3D printers were like the size of a room. Mm-hmm. They were huge. They cost like $60K or something. And he petitioned the school board to let him get one. And he got this thing for our school, and we fiddled around on the 3D printer making stuff. And so I had a little 3D print. I had like a crazy video that I learned to cut together in his class. And I had some of this new media graphic design stuff, and I got into the program. And so I did a Bachelor of Design at York University. That was like the next phase.
And that required you having to move
to Toronto,
from Cambridge to Toronto.
Correct.
And so was that the first time you moved away from parents?
Oh yeah. I was 17. I was 17 when I got in. And yeah, I moved to Toronto. I'd visited Toronto maybe a handful of times in my life because my aunt lived here. And
not the same aunt that had.
No, not the same aunt. Yeah, a different aunt. And my uncle was here going to med school.
Okay.
And he was like the coolest uncle. He would play punk music for me in his car. He would drive a Toyota Tercel. We'd listen to Thursday. It was awesome. So I was like, Toronto seems cool. There's a lot of culture in Toronto. Suburbs are great. They're beautiful. Cambridge is really beautiful. Like, in terms of hikes, but Toronto is where, where it's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I moved away for school, and I got into York. At the time they had a program that was called York Sheridan Bachelor of Design. And it was split between the two institutions. So I traveled between Sheridan and York, and we do a lot of
which not that this matters to anyone listening, but what are the campuses for you?
So Sheridan was the Oakville campus.
Okay.
And then York, it was technically, so if you're familiar with York campus, we're getting nerdy, but the building, I think now, because my wife teaches part-time there, is the Dedale building.
I don't know.
So it's like the design building. Part of it is shared with Seneca College. Okay. So Seneca has their animations program, animation program in that building. So we'd go between the two. And so York, we did a lot of like design theory. And then Sheridan also design theory, but a lot of like more practical stuff. Right. And it was a super cool program at the time because it was very broad. And so in your first few years, you do everything. Like we did history of typography. We would do graphic design. We do packaging design, web design and coding. A lot of my close friends work in, tech now, and to varying degrees. And, towards the end of your studies, you'd kind of start to specialize in something because we had these workshop specific, like self-driven credits that we do.
Right.
And then internships.
Did you finish there with a degree and diploma, or?
Yeah, you finish with a Bachelor of Design, broadly. And what was cool about it, I think it was very much a launch pad for a lot of very established people in different design fields right now, I would say. Again, in like completely different disciplines. So I mentioned to you before, my wife is like a very high level researcher. She's done really cool work for like public good nonprofits. She's in architecture now. So everyone's doing all of these different things. But because the program was so unique, a lot of big companies started hiring out of it. So I had a lot of friends in like the heyday of the golden handcuff of Facebook that were getting poached out of our program. So a lot of people went into tech, but like this program was very unique. So they were hiring people out of it.
Right. And
I had a teacher that effectively put me on to, I was interested in industrial design, but like really told me that like, hey, you need to learn about 3D modeling. You need to think about like environmental design. And she basically pushed me to pursue that more specifically. And so
what was it about those specific areas that she felt would resonate with you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess the first project that really like was of interest to me was an environmental design project. Okay. And a lot of the way that people were perceiving like the output from that was like to make wayfinding posters and that kind of thing. And I wanted to make like a physical piece, not to actually build the physical thing, I guess, at that point, but like I had a physical concept for a slide to like tie people with nature. And so I came up with this concept of like a slide that would wrap around trees, so that kids, when they were young, could like interact with nature in a more like unique, closer way.
Right.
This was a very dangerous slide that I designed. Like I had not refined the skill set at that point, but it was a really cool project where she sort of like taught me about the software that I would need to be using to do that. She started to teach me a little bit more about like architecture and like thinking about objects in the world. I had to think about scale in a way that I wouldn't have traditionally with kind of like 2D media. So there were a lot of these like intangibles. And like I said, the program was very, towards the later years, like much more self-directed. And so as I was realizing I was interested in that, I just found it very easy to like pour all of my energy into it because it was fascinating.
There's a term you use there that I want to ensure that everyone understands. Wayfinding. What does the wayfinding mean?
Like wayfinding in terms of environmental design. Wayfinding is the thing that saves you a tension headache when you're going through an airport or something. It's a lot of it has to do with contrast and like visibility for people who can't or maybe like vision impaired, and it's about creating a system that can help people navigate spaces in a way that doesn't induce panic. And so if they're in a rush or there's something very stressful in their life, like in a hospital, they're able to get to from point A to point B, whether they speak the language that the sign's in or not. That's where you'd have like iconography, play with typography. It's like crucial to how we navigate the world.
So now, if you're listening, you understand the importance of that specific medium.
100%.
Because imagine a world where you showed up to an airport and you didn't know whether or not your flight was on time. You didn't know where your check-in gate was. You didn't know where customs was. Imagine you were on a highway and they only put the sign up for the turnoff when the turnoff presented itself.
Disaster.
So you can imagine, given those scenarios based on high traffic, what the outcome of that would be.
Yeah. The stakes are high.
Right? Literally.
Yeah.
So I like this. It's a good framework.
Cool. And I will go on a tangent because it was a circuitous route to get to what I do now.
So let's go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
So
I opened the book back up. The bookmark is now put to the side.
Sure. Okay. So let's like jump to career from education, though the education was pivotal.
Well, and actually, before you do it,
Sure.
Were there any co-ops that you were able to work on while you were in school?
Yeah. So I did an internship. I mean, I had again, this was like a very guerrilla program. So I had like a professor that got me a graphic design project designing the logo for a stone interlocking company. And I was young and I met this guy is it Flamborough Downs that has the casino?
I don't know, to be honest.
Some crazy casino. Okay. I like drove out in the middle of the night to meet this guy to present my logo design. So there was this like, aspect of like having to be self-directed and learn the field. But all that's to say, going through the program, there was these opportunities that popped up to try to test your skill in the real world. And then there was internship. And so I did an internship at Umbra, actually, which Umbra, is a great, well-known Canadian company. I had applied to be an industrial designer at Umbra. And so I did all these interviews and it was like, yeah, you're going to work in the industrial design space. They had this like cool incubator room that everyone worked in and everyone, put feedback into critiquing products and that kind of thing. And I showed up for my internship and they put me in the marketing team. And so I was like, okay, this is not what I expected, but I would say now is a valuable like asset to understand, how the storytelling of an object is crucial actually to the success of an object as well. Yes. Very crucial. And like if there's a disconnect in how you're explaining, a designer's thinking, or even like the angle at which you're photographing something, it can be pretty catastrophic to the success of a project that takes years and a lot of investment. Yeah. So that was a really interesting, not what I thought I was going to be doing, but ended up doing it. And then after that, I started working in an interior design studio in the city. And it was a decent sized team, and a lot of my like best friends in design and closest colleagues, we all kind of worked there, and sharpen steel. Like they're all incredibly talented, and we learned a lot from each other. Mm-hmm. That particular firm had an interest in industrial design, but had no industrial designers. And so I applied. I showed, some of the physical objects I'd made. I showed packaging design. I showed that like I understood graphic design enough to make pitch decks and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And basically I got a position as an industrial designer there. Show up on my first day of work. I'm in a different building in a room, myself and one other person. We're not even like connected to the studio. So it was jarring because I did my interview walking through this like cool design studio with sail chairs. And I was like, whoa, this is the real world. And I ended up, in the dredges. By
yourself.
Yeah.
All right, industrial designer, you're going to go over there in the corner.
Totally.
You want a light? Go design it.
Yeah.
You want to sit at something? Go design it. You're starting on the floor.
Precisely. So again, like my entire career path has just been a little bit like unfortunately self-directed, I guess I would say. So I get this job, I get put in this room and I'm like, wow, there's really not a lot of parameters here. But I'm fascinated with this discipline and I really want to like learn every aspect of it because like I said earlier, as a kid, I like to turn everything over. If I'm going to do something and put my time into it, I want to understand every element of it. And so I was able to sort of self-direct the beginning of my career and wear many hats. And so, I have these ideas of like, we should pitch product. Okay, what does that look like? Well, shoot, I don't really know. Let me design some furniture. Let me find the companies that I think are interesting and analyze their art style and try to present it in that way and like prototype it and make it at scale out of foam. And do all of these things. And all the while I was doing that, I had the degree, but then there's really technical certifications that you generally want to have, especially earlier in your career as an industrial designer. And so I would go, well, it looks like I need to get certified in advanced part modeling in this very expensive software, SolidWorks. I want to do that. And I would just go to the financial controller and say, hey, is there any educational credit I could use to go do this course and get certified in this skill? And pretty much every time he was great. he was like, yep, no problem, and signed it.
You're probably the only person coming up asking to continue education.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Everybody else wanted to like get paid for something.
Yeah.
You're like out there like, what can I learn?
I'm an advocate for CEUs. But yeah, so, you know, I just kind of like got very interested in that and got all of these certifications, found myself, you know, in scenarios where, you know, I'd get the flight to Milan because I'd said we should pitch some furniture. And I'm pretty young at this point, and I'm at the giant Milan fair, and I was told to go figure out how to get product in front of people. So me as a 20-something-year-old, I would walk into a booth that's filled with hundreds of people for a massive business, and I would just shark it, for lack of a better term, to figure out how to get to the CEO or the creative director, and I'd get their card, and like it was endless rejection. But at a certain point, I was very genuine, and I would get through. And so like that eliminated a lot of the fear of like presenting yourself and trying to get, you know, in front of the right person. So these were all things that I think most people get to do late in their career. I just happened to kind of slide in and with some tenacity figure them out. So yeah, after that job, there's a firm in Toronto that does really beautiful interiors work called Powell and Bonnell, which is Fenwick and David founded the company. The name's there, and they had the interiors business, and then they also had a line of furniture that was sold through showrooms across Canada and the US. And you know, the next step for me, I had kind of the 3D knowledge. I understood how to build things. I understood how to pitch, but I really wanted to like immerse myself more in the manufacturing and really like understand all of the techniques, understand MOQs, understand how catastrophically things can go wrong.
I don't know what this MOQ.
Yeah, minimum order quantity. Yeah, so it's probably called something else in different disciplines, but you know, basically anything that you want to do in industrial design, you're going to have to put a lot of money up to do it. And so the stress of having tooling made, if there's a, you know, 1/32 of an inch error in what you're submitting, could be a $60,000 mistake, like easily. At best. And so I really wanted to get into all of that and like learn it. So yeah, I applied to this firm, and you know, fortunately both the partners were kind of getting to retirement age and had definitely earned their retirement and made some beautiful product. And so they're trying to think about what comes next. And so I applied saying like, hey, I can design product for you, but I can also be a part of the build. And so I got brought on, and yeah, so then I was finding myself in shops all around the city. It was like an interesting time because a lot of the fabricators that were fabricating the product were retiring.
And this is here.
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah. The bulk of it they were making in Toronto. So there's like an amazing leather worker named Kai Kruger that we worked with that did a lot of like the Louis Vuitton store installations. So I'd learn a lot about like skiving leather and like how to apply belting leather with rivets to the Mesa stool that I designed for the brand. And so it was a lot of like
very cool
getting the opportunity to work in all of these materials and both design product for market, but then also look at product that was really selling for them, where like the metalsmith was retiring, and go, oh no, we need to find someone new in a skill that to a certain degree, it wasn't as in vogue and was dying off. And so like finding someone with the capability and building a new relationship with a new...
Not easy.
And you don't want your best-selling stool to all of a sudden not be able to be sold because you can't find a partner. So yeah, all of that was very interesting. And then I say this as fortunately now because you know, it was a benefit, but I got laid off during the pandemic.
Jake and I were just talking about the incredible opportunity to work with unique materials and how mastering those materials truly defines a great product. That exact dedication to innovative material in organic form is why I am so proud of my ongoing partnership with Aquanta Pools. They have been an incredible partner of this podcast, and if you have been listening for a while, you already know exactly how much I respect what they do. Because I like to call what they do and what they build the mirage. Because when you look at the backyard oasis they create, you will honestly struggle to believe it is real. Drawing on over 20 years of experience in the pool industry overseas, Yuri and his team bring this extraordinary product to life right here in Ontario. Aquantapools utilizes stunning biodesign technology originally from Italy, and the brilliance of this product is that it is inherently engineered to withstand our harsh Canadian climate. Because it's built with an advanced elastic liner rather than rigid concrete or fiberglass, it naturally expands and contracts during extreme freeze-thaw cycles without ever cracking. From a mechanical standpoint, these pools are incredibly versatile. You can run them with whatever water management setup you prefer. That includes saltwater generators, advanced UV and ozone systems, traditional chlorine or standard sand, and cartridge filtration systems. But what truly sets Aquantapools apart as a marvel of product design is the surface itself. They utilize a special resin blended with microband sand. That integrated microband technology actively prevents mold, mildew, and bacteria growth right at the surface level. This ensures your pool remains pristine, hygienic, and incredibly durable year after year. If you want to transform your backyard into an absolute masterpiece of design and engineering, you need to connect with Yuri. You can find a link to Aquantapools right in the liner notes, or you can email me and I'll give you a direct connection. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, at issued4construction.ca. All right, let's get back to Jake and hear about how a massive career pivot changed everything.
Because I think when that happened, though it went completely the other way, the home industry and the furniture industry panicked and pretty immediately was like, where do we cut back? Well, if everything's shut down, how many people are going to stores to buy furniture? How are we going to ship furniture to New York, to California? What the hell is happening? That's probably the first thing to go. And so I got furloughed, which obviously was...
You got...
Furloughed was the term they were using at the time. Fired, I think, is
Furloughed
would be the layman's term, but I know that's the polite term. That
nice diction there.
Yeah, that was being used on CBC all the time. So I got furloughed, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. I had built a body of work design for that brand. Knew what I was doing, and it was a fortunate. Okay, let's lean all the way into this. There is the benefit of. From an investment perspective, not having to pay for flights to Milan and to all these places to present my work and try to build business relationships because no one's doing it right now. And so it came down to quality of the work and the skill set. And if I could get the meeting, generally I could make it happen. And I've been fortunate to build really great relationships with the brands that I designed for since then.
So what did it look like as you were let go? Well, what was your immediate reaction? Was it something that you anticipated? Was it something that you were not anticipating at all?
No, completely blindsided. Okay. I mean, I think like everyone, I'm sure once the pandemic happened and people were losing their jobs, I think we all had this low level, maybe high level cortisol spike. So I think there's that degree of there was universal uncertainty, but no, I didn't see it coming at all. So, I think it could have gone one of two ways. I could have cried and panicked about it, which I'm sure I did for a day or whatever, but I've never known how to do anything but work hard. If there's something I'm interested in, it's all that I can focus on. And that's in life and in work. And so that happened, and pretty immediately I wasn't well, I guess I got to look for work elsewhere, or I got to go on EI. I was okay, well, then the only thing I can do right now is try to pursue licensing my work and designing pieces. Right. And I immediately hit the ground with it.
So how did you, it's funny because we talked about this before recording. From a contractual standpoint, if you knew that you were going to go into a business where design was literally everything to do with your value.
Sure. Yeah.
How do you know the right lawyer to find? And how did you understand what it would look like to protect yourself against potential plagiarism?
Yeah. So
is that even right? It's not plagiarism. I don't know.
Plagiarism is the right term, knockoffs. I mean, work that I did in the in the prior jobs before sort of starting my studio was literally knocked off in the city by fabricators that would, there would be a spec through for a product that I designed for, the company or internally, and then someone would bid to do the cheaper version. And it's happened. And it's just a part of the industry. I think
you have to accept it.
You have to accept it. IP is a very interesting thing. I definitely didn't understand it when I first started. So I think, like, fortunately, I have always operated off of kind of that thing we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. There's just a gut read that you get on people in terms of integrity, what they're hoping to do, and whether the relationship is extractive or whether it's collaborative.
Yeah. Or abusive.
Or abusive. And so I think when you've lost your job, really, you have nothing but your gut to gauge what the right decision is, because there is no external career factor. And so I started pitching work out to companies, and, would review with a lawyer like what an agreement would look like, but like I wasn't about to spend tens of thousands of dollars to review those contracts. I was going off of, I think this is genuine. I want to do this.
This is all pre-AI.
Totally pre-AI. Yeah. No, there was no AI to apply here.
I'm saying this for those listening. I understand this.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, honestly, it probably would have been way less stressful if there was like AI for that specific application. That might have been helpful. You definitely still want a lawyer to pen it, but like just to kind of frame for you, what am I looking for here? What does some of this terminology mean? That would have been helpful. But luckily, so I started working with Boyd Lighting in Colorado, and I still work with them to this day. We put out multiple collections a year.
How long ago was this that you started working with them?
5 years ago, something like that. Which is crazy to say, because like typically it takes 2 years to get product to market. But we just have such a chemistry, and I think
special
based on the relationship, like a lot of the time the designer is kept far away from the internal processes. But there's like a high level of trust that I really appreciate with Skylar that runs that brand, and Frank and Mark, the engineer, and where they bring me in to the process. And so I can send actual technical files and have real technical conversations and like be involved in a way that means if we want to do something, we can get it done.
Right.
And that's like totally, you're dating at that point. You're in a real, it's not even a business relationship. Yeah. You're in an emotional,
there's
real relationship.
Almost like a brotherhood.
100%. With like a unique goal. And so, in those 5 years, we put out way more collections than should be doable. And it's because there's excitement.
Way more than should be doable.
Yeah.
Why? What's your definition of doable?
I mean, like doable with one designer and a brand in a calendar year is like maybe one thing. But I think, to do it right, I guess, but with one particular brand, because there's only so much product development budget for a company anyway. But with these guys, I wanted to start exploring blown glass. And so we started working with Steve in Oakland and developed a blown glass collection. And then all of a sudden that's a tool in the toolkit. And so now the next 2 pieces that incorporate this beautiful colored blown glass that we're doing, we could do them a lot quicker because there was that dialogue. Yes. And I'm a part of the actual process as opposed to someone sort of contracting. Fractionally being involved. Right. Yeah. So sorry, I might have lost my train of thought, but no, question.
No, you're talking about the evolution of where you were, what you were doing.
Yeah. Right.
And getting to the point where you're going out and starting your own thing, and you're just trying to figure it all out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess at this point now it's, I've learned the IP element of it.
Yeah.
I understand like how important the designer's goal is and what they've created. And I think that the smartest companies as well, especially considering how much like AI is being implemented into a lot of this stuff nowadays. I think the smartest companies do understand that like looking to the future, especially a designer's body of work and like that perspective of what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. It is an unquantifiable thing that becomes immediately quantifiable and valuable as an asset when the thing is actually made.
It's funny because I've heard a lot of people say, you got proof of concept. Mm-hmm. And one of my responses is once you've actually passed proof of concept, mm-hmm. you have proof of product.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good way of putting it. And you hope to get to proof of product with people, because I think once you get to that, then there's an actual, it's interesting. Like, so I consider industrial design as a technical skill. Obviously there's like a technical aspect to it. I'm a huge fan of architecture, as you speak with a lot of architects. It's fascinating to me. It's almost too big for me. The
pool?
No, the implication. Like I think having to, your design output being, I'm designing a space that so many people are going to come through and interact with it. It's going to shape the way a landscape looks, the way a city's density grows. All of those things feel heavy and important, and I'm fascinated by it. But I think just for me, the reason I'm drawn to objects and smaller scale things is like I'm a problem solver on the small scale, and I want to have a perspective to what I'm producing that is not rubric based. So I've never approached designing as, I think I've analyzed this company and they're missing this type of product, and doing X, Y, and Z from a proportional standpoint will make something that sells. That's almost never worked for me.
Right.
The actual coming at it from a perspective of like, this is what I'm trying to say, for lack of a better term, and this is what I'm trying to do with the piece. Starting there and then applying the technical skill to get it across the finish line and make it buildable for the brand and that kind of thing. Every time that I've approached it from that perspective, where there's this like unquantifiable, here's what I'm trying to do, and the brand I'm working with really gets it, those are the pieces that immediately start to work. And I think that's very interesting in this day and age, because it's like, I could probably run a report on a brand I'm working with really quickly to see what typologies there's a hole in their line for.
Yeah. And
I'm not doing that. And it's actually continued to work better and better for me, not taking that approach.
I think it's probably going to.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so.
I think if you were to go into a situation where you're trying to like, trying to be everything to everyone, it's going to be too hard.
Yeah.
It's too hard.
And it's interesting because like, we're totally digressing now, but like to just like wax poetic about it. What's I find so interesting about where the discipline is right now, like industrial design is, in the 70s and 80s, like the industrial designer that was designing this product was like foundational to the brand's evolution. So like the entire style of what, was being output would be informed by the contrast and the relationship between the designer and the brand, and they'd grow into something. There is what I think is going to be a blip of a moment right now, which is, a focus on just that end product, and that's why I think in a lot of cases, a lot of brands are going, well, who's a marketable person that we can produce something with as a marketing exercise. And a lot of times it might be someone from a different discipline. In a lot of cases, they're wonderful and they will actually produce something great. It might be someone who's just got a lot of followers or something. But what I've realized, the brands that are 100 plus years old, like the ones I'm working with and the ones I think have a lot of longevity, they look at those as two different streams. There's like a product that's a marketing product that is a flash in the pan. Mm-hmm. And then there is a relationship built with a designer that defines, in connection with where that brand wants to go, what that looks like. And that's what I'm interested in. So I don't want to spread myself too thin, I think personally, and try to have one thing over there and be everything for everybody. It's not.
So what have been some of the more, I would say, well-established products that you designed?
Sure. So I think the one that the first product that I did for Boyd Lighting was called the Spire Collection, and it's a decorative piece, I would say. It's got slip cast porcelain from Portugal and milled brass. Shocker, right? And milled brass, which is, metalwork is what I would say Boyd does incredibly well. Yeah. But it was, they were a very decorative, I would say, brand at the time. They'd always had this like modernism to the DNA, but there was a lot of decorative aspect to it. And so when I came to them, the perspective was sort of like, I love what you do that is modern. I don't want to completely toss away decorative, but I am going to toss away excessive crystal and those kinds of things. And so I'm going to make the form beautiful and organic and decorative, but we're going to pull back everything that we don't need from that so that it's just a sculptural shape that's done in a modern way.
Got it.
And so it was a big departure for them, and it immediately clicked. And so we've since then, we've kind of formulated this idea of taking materials and kind of pushing them to do things that like conventionally they shouldn't do.
An example.
So an example, a collection that we've done that's done really well, fortunately, is the Nest collection. And the whole idea there was, I told them I'd love to make a piece that's blown glass set within blown glass, which is just like a disaster. You're asking for a disaster.
That's great.
Fail rate on blown glass is high. It's got to be made by a person. So there's already all of that adds cost, which means you can't add excessive costs into all of the other components, but all the other components are where things can go wrong. It could chip. It could be compressed too tightly and crack. It has to be shipped. It's actually kind of a nightmare. And
glass is crazy.
And it's so fun to work in.
And it's also coming out of our economy, which is not the cheapest economy.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we pursued this collection and like this idea, and like the first few forms I did for it weren't right. And then we finally hit on one that was right. And we added a couple little classic glass blower techniques that like cold working that you wouldn't see typically in pendants. But we figured out how to make it work, and people immediately got it. And it was like refreshing to people. And so now the exploration is like, go ahead.
No, sorry. We're going to remember the word exploration.
Yeah.
You say that people were open to it. Were the people architects, designers, or were they homeowners, builders?
Architects and designers. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely like homeowners will go into these like showrooms and try to spec the things too. But the bulk of my work is, it's in, fortunately, like really wonderful showrooms around the world. And so architects and designers are going into these spaces. And I consider like my piece of what I do in this industry as like, it's one brush that architects and designers paint with to create their spaces. Right. And I hope that I don't want to make a lot of the pieces that just sit in the background. I don't need them all to scream, but I want them to have a presence, because I think when you're thinking about volume and architecture, there are moments that you want to have presence. So it's architects and designers that are typically that are specifying it, because they're looking at these pieces and they're seeing them as like, they're seeing the sort of the ties to the discipline and eras of design. I'm very analog personally, surprisingly. So they're seeing these notes of, I think, how that craft was done for a very long time. And it makes sense to utilize it to help them to further execute and say what they're trying to say in their spaces. And so I always consider that like a great privilege to create something and then see, an architecture firm that I really respect use it in some cases in a way I wouldn't have even thought to use it. Once it's out of my hands, it's not mine anymore.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, so I'll verify if I can say this one, but there was for that Spire Collection.
Without naming names.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so for that Spire Collection, I designed them as these individual leaves. This is the most decorative thing I've done, so I wouldn't say it's entirely reflective of all my work, but I designed them to be these individual leaves, which would mean that you could create a canopy of nature effectively in a space. And there was an architecture studio in the States that was working on a children's cancer hospital, and they used that collection to create like the entire sort of community lobby space, which is like something to me that's pretty powerful and emotional to be like, there was validity to seeing that form, and someone saying that like that adds beauty to what is a very ugly and challenging, terrible thing to have to go through. So that's like the peak, the dream scenario. And then other scenarios is just like someone grabs a pendant and like hangs it lower than I thought and murders it out or whatever, and it's cool. It's cool to see. Like, I think about the forms coming together, and the material is a part of that. But like, I'm actually very open to people manipulating perhaps the color and that kind of thing. Because once I've got the balance right, I feel like I've done my part.
And do you get orders direct, or are they coming through third-party affiliates? How does it work?
So I'm fortunate to not have to handle orders myself. Okay. So for the brands I design for, they've got salespeople, showrooms all over. So the orders go through them. I'll get a lot of inquiries. Like the studio will get inquiries about, hey, can we buy this piece? And I get to forward it to someone, so that's nice. But, this year I did co-found a Canadian designed and made furniture company that we debuted at IDS, which has been wonderful. And it's got a ton of great press and a lot of support from the design community. And in that capacity, I'm working on the engineering of pieces, I'm creative directing, and I'm trying to give younger designers their first license, trying to get this distributed across the country, and, with the goal of exporting Canadian industrial design globally. So that's kind of like an element of the next phase for me would be to continue to do this work and build the relationship with different brands for the studio to be designing with. And like I said, I don't want it to be 100 brands, and then also build Urs into this brand that I'm hoping can make an impact at home, and can serve as a re-education for people about what it costs to domestically manufacture, but also can like support manufacturing designers as a revenue stream and like create some kind of avenue that didn't really exist when I started my studio here.
Right. So we didn't even really get to this. So how many years old is the studio?
The studio's 5 years old. I think 5 years old, maybe a little over 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many people, actually, before we answer the question, how many people did you start? It was just you, and did you have someone else, or? Yeah.
So even to this day, functionally, this is something that I don't want to let go of. So maybe we'll have a conversation about scale after, but like part of the reason I don't want an insane output for the studio is I want to really be involved in everything.
Right.
So when it comes to what's being designed out of the studio, that's coming from me. So and I think that's the challenging thing with like my discipline is like, would I love to bring another industrial designer on? Yes. But I would still want to be designing pieces. So then you would have to find someone who just really loves model making, or that, which those people exist, but it's more challenging. And so I think the complexity of something like that was, okay, well, if I really want to make sure that my body of work as an industrial designer also reads as a bit of like an artist's body of work, that adds complexity. So perhaps what I can do is create a business that doesn't carry my name, where I can allow other people to facilitate like their body of work and help support putting that out, and use the connections that I have to leverage that so that they can start to do, some of this stuff.
Right. So what does that look like?
So in terms of Urs, it's a core thing. It's two of us to start. So it's myself and my business partner, Jason. So we co-founded it together. Yeah. Jason has a background in sales. So he has a family run rep group that brought a lot of the, best furniture brands from Europe to Canada. And so, we've been in touch for a long time, and we've had all of these kind of coffee conversations. Rarely did it turn into anything serious, but I hit a point where I was speaking about the fact that I speak to a lot of younger designers, and I like try to help mentor when I can a lot of younger designers about some of the stuff that you don't learn about this industry. And the frustration that all of them had was that like licensing a design is such a necessary element of a passive income for a new design studio to start to be able to run their practice. But there's no way of approaching it, and it's all kind of behind a wall. And then second to that, there's not many places in Canada that do it. So in Europe, licensing is a huge part of design. I mean, even in automotive design, like there's designers that come in and design these pieces, and it's crucial, and everyone understands it. In Canada, was maybe 2 companies that did that, and the focus was always, let's get a European to design for us. And so I was like, well, maybe I can fix that, but I'm an industrial designer. My products might sell, but I don't know everything about sales. Yeah. And so, collaborating with Jason, who understands what's needed to bring product to market.
Where was he before?
So the family run group, Henderson Resource Group, which is wicked. And, they do amazing work. Like they've worked on U of T projects, and it's him, his wife, Val, and his brother. So like, again, as you can see, family oriented, like relationship based as I am. But what was interesting about the two of us coming together was like, I'm aware of all the stuff that's generated in the design process. That is, you would think an asset to telling the story and selling and building a brand. So many brands make no use of it. And Jason understood that from a sales perspective, there are certain ways that we should be implementing that. And so I think for the two of us, it was like, okay, let's come together. Yeah. Let's figure out the designer as authorship element. Let's figure out the brand as something that people can understand and digest. And then let's figure out this really challenging thing of like domestically manufacturing and using domestic materials and making everything truly here.
Right.
So that became kind of like the challenging 3-pronged goal, but fortunately it's working.
So you run the studio with your business partner. You don't have to look after sales, particularly yourself, which is fantastic. So one, how do you get commission for something? First question. Second question is, how does it work internationally? because you don't have to answer this question necessarily, but if your product is being sold internationally, do you have to then claim tax?
Yeah, it's pretty
On
complicated.
an international scale? What does that look like if the product was designed here? Is your point of sale?
Yeah. So
please get into that a little bit.
Well, on the interprovincially, it's very interesting. Okay, so first, like commission.
Yeah.
So personal like licensed work that the studio does.
Yeah.
We've been lucky, though I'm bumbling through it, that like it's been essentially word of mouth. So, the relationship started with Boyd. Another brand saw the pieces in a showroom in a design center that they were in. And they were like, who designed this? And they reached out directly. And then we started working with them because the vibe was right. We started sharing on Instagram images of cars. I think I shared like the Alfa Romeo Montreal with them. So we've
never exchanged messages around cars.
We can do that. I'm happy to. And
I have stuff going back and forth with a bunch of different people on.
Yeah. So it's just
automotive.
Like, I'm in. I'm in. You can send me watches. You can send me anything built. Yeah, I can tell.
Sorry, what I'm pointing to right now is there's an entire shelf in here of like memorabilia from my youth.
Yeah.
Starting with a BMW Z8 going down to like the Bugatti. I can't remember what it's called right now. Is it the Bugatti 1? I can't remember what it's called. Most expensive, at one point, the most expensive car in the world.
So,
yes.
Wicked. And so, yes, like as you can see, organic. It's been organic, which is frustrating but there is something about creative practices that I think you can hold on to something so tightly and be so precious about like your perception and your output and what you're trying to make happen to a certain degree that you absolutely crush it. Right. And so I try to be very mindful of not doing that. So studio work, it's been word of mouth. It's been reputation, fortunately, and like people reaching out and saying, we really like the work. What's he like to work with? Good. And we should work with him. Right. And so that's how the studio has gotten its work. I've done certain private commissions for architects and interior designers where like they reach out about something really specific that they want to build. Sometimes the challenge is interesting enough that I don't even feel like I need to design the form, but I want to help them realize it. So like one instance was making this massive table for a client that started as an 8-seater and expanded out to a 26-seater with no central leg, and it had metal. I had to import hardware from Germany, wood, backlit stone. It was nuts. So private commissions.
Hold on. I get it. You want to answer the question.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Yeah. Crazy table.
No central leg.
Yeah.
Backlit stone.
Yep. Yep. Which was flush set with metal trim. So you can imagine the tolerances are pretty scary there. And then, this thing needed to basically expand a massive span and not cave in the middle functionally and look pretty and have all of these things come together. So
is this a product that people will be able to see when we talk about?
I doubt it. I don't think I could ask the designer, but
not allowed.
I don't think
that's fine.
So for me, it was like I did the industrial design for the interior designer and architect that did this space. And I don't think their client.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
This is totally fine. You're allowed to say no.
Yeah. But I can tell you, so I can describe.
Sorry, everyone.
Crazy. So yeah, the private commissions, like I did for quite a while. And yeah, I think maybe I'm still open to them if they're the right ones, but I definitely feel like focusing on the body of work is the most interesting to me. So hopefully that answers your like how do commissions come through question. It's been word of mouth basically, and press obviously is helpful. We've been fortunate to have good press, and people like the work and are interested by it. The shipping product is very interesting. So when it comes to like license work, again, don't have to worry about that. The way you probably know this, but like the way royalties work in Canada, there's a certain threshold of your income that can be royalties before there's tax on it. So it's actually pretty easy. You know what amount of product in particular categories is sold, and you get paid your royalty on that. Yep. So that's nice. It's a nice like passive income. It means that you can focus on being creative and not have to do some of that kind of overhead tedious work. With Urs, this is a whole new world, right? So not only are we cutting POs to the woodworker in Rosemont to build the pieces as we're selling them, we're cutting POs to them we got to sell them to the client. We've got to ship them logistically. We've got to have them packaged, and then we have to tax. And so, we haven't gotten international yet because the focus is really on Canada and the States, though I would love to get us over to Europe. And there's been, some offers, which is cool. But even within Canada, this is a thing that's been in the news plenty. Like, interprovincial business is complicated. So, for example, the design for a particular piece might have been done in Toronto. We have it produced by our partner in Quebec. So the production is happening there, and then it's being shipped off to the end client. In a perfect world, there's a particular tax in Quebec that like you can claim that basically. But the intricacy of it is like where that fabricator's work is done is as soon as the product is packaged, because we're managing the logistics. So they have to charge us that tax in Quebec, and then we can ship that out to a client and we can recuperate the tax on the back end, but it's just a risk level. And so I think like VAT and everything gets even more confusing once you're into Europe. But even within Canada, there's like FOB and origin shipping and like all of these elements of like where
it's a term I'm unfamiliar with as well. FOB?
Yeah, freight on board. So it's like, so there's all of these elements to like where is the handoff for when the good is done by a particular party.
Got it.
And then where is our like end sale? Where does that happen? And where do we need to be collecting tax because we are also fabricating? So there's an element of, because we wanted to make all of the fabrication within Canada, and make it out of domestic materials, like raw materials might be coming from the East Coast, they might be coming from Quebec. So there's a moving target there with that.
Yeah.
And budgeting.
Yeah.
The builds might be happening there. A portion of the build on a particular piece might be in Toronto, like the metalwork, and then the upholstery is happening in another province. So it's probably needlessly complex to start, but a major portion of why we did this was also to facilitate a bit of a resurgence to like the domestic furniture manufacturing industry, because it has slowed down. And to a certain degree, the reason we were able to do that is traditionally companies wouldn't even bat an eye at a new furniture brand if the MOQ, the minimum order quantity, wasn't like 500 pieces, because they were getting enough work from the States to just say, nope. But that all changed. Right. And so now, because the brand is interesting and it's like been a bit of a lightning rod, fortunately here, the actual project is of interest to these shops. And now then there's orders that are coming through and the relationship is built, but the door would have been closed on your face like traditionally, I think.
So if you're gonna go into this field, you've got to have a couple good people on your side, on your team. Sure. You're talking about some good lawyers.
Yeah.
Some good accountants.
Yeah. Wonderful accountants. Yeah. I love the accountants. Yeah, they're great. And like, yeah, they handle that complexity of all of that on our behalf really well, which is great. Obviously, lawyers are very important, and like because we've decided to focus on like licensing designs as well, there is a period of like, here's what our licensing contract looks like, and the designer has to review it. And, so there's that element of it. We did try to frame things, in the way that like a Spanish or a European brand would be in terms of royalties, which is much higher than what happens, in North America, especially in the States. So we've taken that route. And I think that's really appealing to people. But it also adds complexity for us, because it means that like then the margin is tighter. So either the investment has to be higher on how much we're going to produce, or the cost has to be higher. And it's existing in a culture where like a lot of people would be shocked to hear that a chair is $1,500. But if you think about the raw lumber to make certain chairs that we're making, like the complexity level, we might be looking at like $300 in lumber. That's before we do the glue up and we get our blank together. So that's going to take labor in Canada. Then that's all got to be milled out. That's got to be joined. It's got to be finished. It has to go to an upholsterer. We have to buy the textile. There's literally no world that you can buy reasonably like a chair for $300 in Canada that's made in Canada out of domestic material. But that's the perception with the field broadly, due to like the global export of furniture. And so that's kind of what we're up against. But it's a nice
Right.
The right people understand it. And I think it's a great challenge with my background in industrial design to think about like, how do we articulate that so that people understand that like, we're not making these things to be throwaway. We want them to be passed down to your kids. Like I'd love for some of them to end up in museums. Like that's the goal. And we want to make it so the everyman can buy it.
Yes.
And I think we can get there on certain products, but it's not, there's no world where our build cost is $80 to make a chair. It's just not possible.
Again, go back to what I said before. You can't be everything to everyone.
100%.
Right. So you gotta know your niches. You gotta know who your market is, and you gotta be able to go and fulfill what the needs of that market are without compromise. And so, yeah, there's going to be people that can't afford the chair. Okay. Well, I mean, as great as it is that you want to be Canadiana, it's not for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 100%. And so for us, it's like if the end consumer can't get every product, I mean, in a perfect world, you wish they could, but if that can't happen, well, then, the woodworking shop that would not have an opportunity to grow, or the metalworking shop that would have more of a challenge to grow, can potentially grow and staff more people. And that industry offers jobs to people. And like, I think that's the long game that we should be playing nationally across the board. And it is shifting. I mean, it's definitely shifting. And we've been fortunate to like come through at that time. That's been, you can't predict it, but it has been helpful, though it's also been complicated. It's been helpful.
Yeah, I love this. Jake, I have found this super interesting.
Cool. Thank you.
A different type of conversation. And I've definitely learned a number of different terms today.
Okay.
that I didn't know before. And in a segment of the industry that I don't really know. And I've only had conversations with like one other company of somewhat of a similar nature. So
interesting. Yeah.
I've really enjoyed learning about this.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an awesome field, but it's a small field in Canada. Right. There's not a lot of us doing it, and it's because it's hard. But yeah, I think our design community is incredibly supportive. And I do think that though there's some differences between terms and the disciplines, like we're sort of all in the trenches together, and it's a miracle anything gets made ever anyway. And so I think it's nice to be able to talk about the differences there. And I appreciate being able to speak about it.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to provide a format to do so. The other question that I have for you is there a practice that exists, and you weren't ready for this question, so it's coming out of nowhere.
Okay.
Is there a practice that exists, whether it is both it could be locally, nationally, internationally, that you haven't worked with, that you've like really wanted to partner with on something?
To like design something for them?
Yeah.
That's a pretty wicked question. I mean, there's a ton of like international brands that let me name one that'll never happen. There's an Irish brand called Oliveira that I think is super cool. I visited them in Newry in the north of Ireland when I was there.
Why will it never happen?
Because I get it. They only want to design everything in-house because it's a family-owned business and all of the kids are designers and they're all designing it. And it's awesome. So it was like a privilege to see their operation and be a part of it. And I love it, but it's never going to happen.
What happens if they did like a family and friends line?
You know what? Maybe I need you on the team then to make that happen. So that would be cool. For me, it's almost more like I love to learn about the brand. So typology is what's most interesting to me. So like on my 100% on my bucket list is I want to design the Olympic torch. I don't know if I'll ever get the opportunity to. I might die before the Olympics are back in Canada, but that's a really cool challenge because the flame can't go out.
Greg Durrell, I don't know that you listen to my podcast or not, but now I'm going to actually tell you to listen to this one. Greg Durrell, if you are listening, make that happen. Okay.
Greg, I would love to do that because it's such a... like the stress brings a lot of joy. That's a stressful challenge. The flame can't go out. The flame goes out, you failed. So you test this thing in wind tunnels that Formula One cars would be tested in. Would love to do it. And really love to do a tile collection. I've designed a bunch of tiles. I think stoneware is really cool. I've incorporated it in other designs. I've done slip cast stuff for lighting, but I'd love to do a tile collection. Also, I'm Portuguese. So like a core part
It's a
of
coming of age story.
yeah, it's a core part of the culture, you know, like even just like if it's not a Portuguese company, like some company that is producing tiles, I would love to bring a perspective to that because I'm like a form focused designer. I love form, I love color. So I'd love to do that. And yeah, I mean, I could rattle off a million furniture brands. So I don't.
The whole purpose of this is putting this out there.
Sure. Okay. Cool.
You know, we don't know who's listening.
Yeah, that's
and
a good point.
two, nothing's going to come into existence without talking into it.
Yeah, it's very, very true. You have to make your own opportunity. I mean, there's certain brands that I would love to work for. So I'd love to design for B&B Italia. I think they do really cool stuff. I'd love to design for Vitra. I hope this isn't a diss. I hope this is like a critique of product line that they would be like, hey, this person actually cares. I think the Vitra line's really cool. There's so many iconic pieces in it. And all of the output of late is very good at solving a problem. But I would love to design a piece that like is a bit out there for them again. Not to be self-indulgent, but like to take a big swing and see how it lands. I'd love to do something like that.
Okay.
And like, yeah, another brand would be Magis. That's a brand that does like really, really interesting stuff. So, but I think for me, it's like, I'm one part of the process. So any brand that's interested, it would be, I'd love to like
developing a team. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, go ahead. Yeah. Developing a team. Yeah. And I think for me, it's like, almost more rewarding to have someone be like, hey, would you be interested in to look at it and be like, I don't know where I line up with this, because that's like where I love points of contention. I'd love to like find the thing that makes us all go, whoa, on bated breath here. Like, will this work? This is a departure. I'd love to do that. And a lot of times that comes from places you don't expect. So I think though I'm like, there's these pinnacle brands that like my favorite designers have designed for. I actually love the idea of a brand being like, what do you think we could do something? And I might be like, hell no, there's nothing that's going to work, but I might find something strange that could be lightning in a bottle and like we could take a crack at it. And so, yeah, that the unexpected is like the most interesting for sure.
It's funny how you just did what what the best comedians always do is they bring it back to the beginning.
Oh, full circle. Okay.
And you just did it. You just said like, you want to find points of contention.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about how early on in your life, in your home, that's where things started, and that's when your current wife was like, I am, you know, I don't know how this was going to go. Should I have had that conversation about pot? Well, we've gone full circle on this, and I got to tell you, man, when we first spoke, it was a pleasure chatting with you then. It's been a greater pleasure chatting with you now. If anyone out there is listening, and you have any influence on any of the companies that Jake just rhymed off, you can reach out to him, obviously.
Yeah.
His website is in the liner notes, and you can email me. I would love to make that connection to say it stemmed from some random person listening to today's episode.
Yeah, that would be very cool. Yeah, it's just nice to hear from people, man. And I appreciate you steering this in a way that's been, you know, candid, and it's been really cool.
Yeah,
so thanks for your time.
It's been my pleasure, man. Thanks for joining me today.
Awesome.